by the way, is what we did.
We're live.
Good afternoon. This is the House Judiciary Committee. It is the 29th of March, 2021. We're in a voting session. There are two bills, actually there are three bills on our voting list. Let's do one that's easy. It is withdrawn. House Bill 102.
Move unfavorable.
There's a motion for an unfavorable
Second.
withdrawal. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. All in favor of the withdrawn unfavorable, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, the bill is an unfavorable withdrawn. All right, we'll go now to Senate Bill 494. This is Senator West's bill. It's the Senate version of the Juvenile Restoration Act.
Favorable.
There's a motion. We are already at a motion for a favorable as amended. I did not receive any amendments to this bill or Delegate Jazz Lewis's bill. So I'm presuming there are no further amendments. We're on the bill as amended. Further discussion from the committee.
Favorable.
I'm laughing at Moon's faces in the camera.
All right. Delegate Grammer.
Yeah, well, quickly on the bill, Mr. Chair. I feel like this bill is much like the bill where we're checking the lead certification at the time we're about to evict a tenant. For my time serving on the fatality work group, watching what the juvenile services, the juvenile system does for these kids, I really think we do these kids a disservice. And if we're waiting for these kids to get convicted of an act, and now we're starting to think about ways we can remediate them, I think this is way too late. I think we need to rethink a lot of things. I think we're failing these kids, just like Dalton Harris's mother said. And I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Malone.
Just on, when we get to 409, I do have an amendment on 409.
I do remember that we received an amendment on 409. That is correct. And I have it here. Okay, so we'll get to that here in a moment. So that's fine. I'm sorry, Delegate Malone.
That's right.
I missed that one. Delegate Juanita Fisher.
Mr. Chair, and I'll make my comments for both bills, if that's okay due to time.
That's fine. Are you in a place where you can take off your mask? And if you're not, that's fine. We
No,
just
I'm
need to
not.
speak
I'm
up a little bit.
sorry.
If you
I-
speak up,
is this
that'd be
better?
fine. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I'm trying to do multiple things. I wanted to say that
Don't
I think
operate.
this. No, I'm not operating. I'm just sitting. So I just wanted to say two important things about 409 and the Senate version we're on. I think that this bipartisan effort has been fought for many hard, long years. I think that this bill is something that our committee needs to move forward for. And I agree with Delegate Grammer. I think our system has failed young people for a long time, but that doesn't mean that we sit here and we don't do anything to move the ball forward. This bill is going to help those that are in prison for a sentence of life in prison without the possibility or release as a minor to have a second look, to have the court establish rules that goes into the procedure of how it would work. I think that this has been done in various other jurisdictions with success. I think that this is a measure that is going to bring justice. And if we're about a state, I think we have to decide whether we're about just crime and punishment or if we're about rehabilitation and second chances. And for me, I believe that the state of Maryland is about rehabilitation. It is for a very a particular group. You all sat through the hearings. I won't go through anything, but I just encourage this body to move favorable for years of hard work to finally come to fruition. Again, it is a bipartisan effort. I think that this bill is going to put Maryland in line with our neighbors in DC and others. And I'm just excited to support this legislation. I'm excited and want to thank publicly Delegate Jazz Lewis, our former member / traitor, who left us for his work. He's now in appropriations for those watching. That's what I meant. He left Judiciary for his work on this bill, and for your leadership, Mr. Chair, and Madam Vice Chair, on this legislation. I'm just excited. Good. This is a great way to start a Monday morning, I got to tell you. So vote favorable. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much. Are there further comments on the legislation? We are on Senate Bill 494. Seeing no further comments or questions, we'll go with the roll call. Vice Chair.
Yes.
Delegate Anderson is excused. Delegate Arikan.
No.
Delegate Bartlett.
Yes, I'm voting favorable on this Senate bill that came out of JPR.
Delegate Cardin.
Yes.
Delegate Conaway.
Yes.
Delegate Cox.
No.
Delegate Crutchfield.
Yes, voting favorably to help our juvenile justice system.
Delegate Deborah Davis.
Yes.
Delegate Wanika Fisher.
Yeah.
Delegate Robin Grammer.
No.
Delegate Griffith.
No.
Delegate Rachel Jones.
Yes.
Delegate Leslie Lopez.
Yes.
Delegate Malone.
No.
Delegate McComas.
No.
Delegate Moon.
Yes.
Delegate Shetty.
Yes.
Delegate Cham.
No, and may I explain my vote? Chair?
Yes.
Thank you.
Please.
I feel, I think Delegate Grammer hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I've been thinking. We're going about this the wrong way, helping juveniles, when it's almost too late. There are other lives that maybe have been at stake due to the crimes that these juveniles have committed. We need to get in front of the curve with students who are children who are at risk, catch them early, catch them sooner, and before they engage in crimes that land them incarcerated for many, many years. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to vote no on this bill.
Thank you. Delegate Ron Watson.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Delegate Williams.
Yes.
13-7, the bill is passed and will go to the floor. Now going to House Bill 409, Delegate
Vote
Jen.
favorable as
It's the
amended.
cross file.
Second.
We already have, just to be clear, we already are on a favorable with an amendment. We already adopted the amendments from Friday. So we're on a favorable with amendment and a second, and then a hold was exercised. There is an amendment. It actually was an amendment that was offered prior to the hold, and it's from Delegate Malone. Delegate Malone, if you would talk about what the amendment does.
Thank you. What this amendment does is it provides that there would just be basically one bite at the apple as far as a reconsideration. One of the concerns that was expressed during the opposition to the bill was the concern that families would have to come back multiple times. So this provides that there would just be one bite at the apple as far as a modification of the sentence. It's fairly simple. I think it's appropriate. It still provides the ability for someone who's done what they can do to rehabilitate themselves and to be looking forward to moving forward with their life. And I don't think coming back again and again will necessarily improve the convicted individual's chances, and it would certainly be torturous to the victim's family and those associated on that side. So I think it's a reasonable amendment, and I would press the amendment.
We have discussion now on the amendment. We'll start with Delegate Cardin, then Griffith, then Watson. Delegate Cardin, please.
Thank you. Just a quick question for the maker of the amendment. I understand the purpose of it, and I think from a policy perspective, it has some merit. But what if you have somebody who comes back after 20 years and petitions, and the people, the decision makers decide, you know what, we just need to see a little more before we can grant this. And they say, we need you to come back in 3 years. Are you saying that they shouldn't?
And in essence, yes, I think you need to be prepared that when you come forward, you need to have your ducks in a row and be ready to make your case at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Griffith.
I want to support this amendment, and the reason why is I think to Officer Amy Caprio, who was just honored by Senators Cardin and Van Hollen for bravery and line of duty for, when she was murdered. And I believe it was 4 individuals involved in that. I think only one was charged with life, the other 3 lesser sentences, but all 3 would be eligible to appeal after 20 years under this bill. And if I have my facts incorrect, please correct me. I always reserve the right to be wrong.
It's not necessarily an appeal. It's the right to, they would be able to request a reconsideration before the judge, which is a different, it's a different thing. So they having a right to an appeal. They can appeal to if it's a longer sentence, they can appeal to a 3-judge panel on the sentence, or they can appeal to Court of Special Appeals, or whatever we're calling that now.
No, I appreciate the clarification. So they would have in 20 years, all 4 of them would have an opportunity to request a reduced sentence, and then each one would have a chance every 3 years thereafter. So there's a scenario where Amy Caprio's family would have to relive this 12 times in a 9-year period. And we want restorative justice and these things. We want to give people opportunities to re-enter society and to rehabilitate. But we also need to be looking out for the victims here, and to force Officer Amy Caprio's family to relive the experience under this bill 12 times in 9 years is, I think, way out of touch. And I would certainly support Delegate Malone's amendment.
Delegate Watson.
Yeah, quick question, Delegate Malone. Just once again on the bill, how long does an individual have to wait before they get their first bite at the apple?
And that's on the bill, but I believe it's 20 years.
20
and I'm
years,
not looking to I'm not looking to change that. I think that wait period applies with or without this amendment. Anyone can feel free to correct me.
20 years of incarceration. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Conaway, then Cox, then Juanica Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members. Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question to you, if you might know this?
Sure.
What does a reconsideration under the judge mean? Does that mean the person feels that they've changed their behavior, or they're just asking for a sentence modification? They think it's too extreme. Which one is it?
They're asking for a modification of their sentence, I think, actually is what they're doing. So reconsideration or a modification of their sentence, yeah.
But not because their behavior or thought pattern has changed for any reason.
Under the bill, the court has a number of factors that they have to look at, and those are delineated in the bill on page, it's the 4th page of the reprint, but page 3 of 4 of the initial bill. And that is in 8110 subsection D, where they look at a wide range of different things when they're looking at whether the sentence should be reconsidered and whether the sentence should be changed for that particular person. So there would have to be a case made, and what the bill allows is for the state and for the defense to make a case and say, okay, this person should have their sentence reduced or not.
Okay, so could a person ask to be evaluated? I don't know which page you would have, but I'm looking at page 3, where it's a number, line 18.7, any report of a physical, mental, or behavior examination of the individual conducted by a health professional. So could a person ask to have their mental health be evaluated to see if a mental health expert might say that they've changed or they appear to be stable?
First of all, that's one of the factors the court shall consider is any reports of physical, mental, or behavioral examinations of the individual. If the defense wanted to put up a evaluation, they could do that. I think that if there were reports that were done by the Department of Corrections already related to the incarcerated person's mental state, I think that they could look at those too. And then the court has to weigh those in determining whether or not to grant a change to the sentence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Delegate Juanica Fisher. And then we're going to go to Delegate Cox because he hasn't talked yet. And then we'll go back to people wanting second bites of the apple. Delegate Juanica Fisher.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to be very brief and encourage my colleagues to resist this amendment. This amendment also assumes that all victims are monolithic in their perspective and their view. If you all recall, it's been weeks now, but if you all recall the hearings, we had victims' families come testify in favor of this legislation, wanting to see individuals have a second chance. I would also say it's up to, there are victim advocates throughout our state that work with victims' families, depending if they want to testify, if they want to just send something written, and things like that. So I just would say the assumption that everyone is going to have the same perspective, I think is a wrong assumption, as you actually heard actual victims' families come and testify in support of this bill, and wanting to see and move on and sort of be in support of this legislation, even with the requirement of obviously notification to a victim or their family members about this legislation. So I just wanted to point that out, that not all victims are monolithic. And I also think, every person's case, in my own experience, is so different. And I think this would really hurt people from having this opportunity by prohibiting it to one time. One can't always, you can do everything that is said, but that does not mean that the parole board is going to not ask for something else, has been stated. And so just to limit that to one opportunity, I think is quite harsh. And so I just encourage everyone to reject this amendment. Thank you.
We'll go to Delegate Cox, then Griffith and Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to urge the committee to support the amendment because to keep in mind that under Maryland Rule 4345, the court still retains its revisory powers, even though this amendment would limit it to one revisory motion. That is only the gratuitous motion, the lack of cause. But for a specific reason of fraud, mistake, irregularity, or a knowledge of an illegality of the sentence, all of those are still fair game. So that this amendment would not impact Maryland 4345 at all. So I would urge that in consideration and support the amendment.
Delegate Watson, then Griffith.
Chair Clevenger, quick question. So this bill is related to juveniles sentenced as adults. In the world of adults sentenced as adults, do they only get one bite at the apple?
Well, I mean, adults in a similar category would have been sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, life without the possibility of parole, or they would have been, let me take a step back. We're talking about people who generally speaking have gotten a sentence where they've received life without parole, life with the possibility of parole, or a term of years, meaning that they could have a number of counts that add up to a pretty big sentence. You're eligible for parole right now if you are life with the possibility of parole. You're eligible for parole at 15 years minus dim credits under the law as it stands right now. You will remember last week we've dealt with legislation to get the governor out of the parole process that would change that to 20 with dim credits, but it got the governor out of the parole process. So they would have that opportunity at that time to be able to do that. If you are being held for a term of years, meaning you sentenced and you receive 60 years of active incarceration, you're eligible, presuming that that is a violent crime, which it almost certainly would be, you would be eligible for parole after 30 years. And you'd be able to go through the process for parole at that point. That's what the adult system, that's what's there in the adult system. The juveniles who are convicted as adults are treated under the same rules as of right now. What this legislation would do is say for the people who were sentenced prior to the effective date of the bill, they would have the opportunity to request a reconsideration. People going forward would still have the opportunity to go through the parole process, and consistent with what we did getting the governor out of the parole process, they could just go through the ordinary parole process. So again, that's what we're looking at. And now if you have more questions, go fire away.
No. And I appreciate that. So let me nail down to really what I'm getting at. This bill is juveniles charged as adults. So if a juvenile charged as an adult and an adult commit the same crime and they get the same charges, would this bill be more restrictive to the juvenile by preventing them from having a subsequent opportunity for parole where it would not apply to the adult who's charged as an adult? It seems on the outset we're being more restrictive to the juveniles than we are with the adults. Am I incorrect?
No, going forward, everybody would still go through the regular parole process. What it would enable is it would enable for juveniles who are charged prior to the effective date of the bill, they would have another way to get a hearing in front of the judge. So it would not, in fact, make it harder for juveniles. It would actually provide another way for juveniles who are already convicted and sentenced to have their sentences modified and reconsidered.
And without this bill, and if the juveniles get additional bites of the apple, is that consistent with the adults getting additional bites of the apple?
Adults can request and can go through the parole process several times. They can go through multiple times, and the parole commission can look at them again and again.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Delegate Griffith, then Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for a second bite of the apple. And to draw the distinction in reference to Delegate Watson, this isn't affecting parole. This is affecting actually reducing the sentence altogether. And the sentence reconsideration doesn't affect the parole process. My concern with the bill, one of my concerns with the bill generally that I think this amendment addresses, and Mr. Chair, if you could clarify for me, is there any pre-qualifiers other than serving 20 years to be able to apply for this?
They have to.
Sorry.
They have to have been convicted as an adult for an offense, and this is at 8110 Section A. Got to be convicted as an adult for an offense committed while they were a minor, sentenced before October 1st, 2021, and have been in prison for at least 20 years. And that is a flat 20. That's not 20 with any consideration for dim credits.
Correct. So there's no performance or behavior qualifications to apply. I mean, you get granted it, yes.
Yeah, but I think here's the thing. Even still, they're going to have to ask for a reconsideration, and they're going to have to go before a judge and say, all right, here are all the things that my client has done. Here's all the things that the defendant has done to improve themselves. They don't have an issue with their mental health. We take a look at the person, take a look at what they were going through at the time that the crime committed, take a look at how they proceeded now, and they're going to have to make that case that they have rehabilitated, that they are ready to return, that they are ready to return to society, and that is what this process allows. It is not a guaranteed get out of jail free card. They're going to have to go before a judge, and quite honestly, they're going to have to go before a state's attorney who's going to be able to put forward the thoughts of a victim and the statements of a victim. We included the language regarding the victim's role in the bill.
I acknowledge all that, Mr. Chair. Where I was going was a little bit different direction, not in terms of the ability to have this be successful, just the ability to apply for this. Because every time, and the question is, the only pre-qualifier to apply is to serve that 20 years. And then they can apply, and if they're declined, they can apply 3 years later and 3 years later for a maximum of 3 times.
Correct.
So what I'm going back to is on the victim's right side, in terms of with no other pre-qualifiers other than just the 20 years, they could apply 3 times, 3 years, so 3 times over 9 years, and then pull the victim back in to relive this 3 times over 9 years. Because there's no other pre-qualifiers to even get to the point where you'd have to bring the victim back in. And I go back again to Amy Caprio's situation. Based on all that, her family could be brought in 12 times over 9 years to relive that to that process. And that's my concern, is the victim rights side, which is where this would limit it to 1 time to make the family only have to relive it 1 time versus not only 3 times, but 3 times potentially 9 years. And that's why I'm supporting the amendment.
I understand that, and let's let other people talk, and
Thank you,
I
Mr.
may
Chair.
say more about that in a second. Delegate Moon, then Delegate Bartlett, then I think we're going to start wrapping this part up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, I would ask you to reject this amendment. One thing, I was just flipping around while everyone was talking and I was absorbing this conversation, but I looked back at what the Supreme Court was wrestling with when they looked at sentencing of juveniles. And a key question that you'll see emerging in these discussions is whether there's any hope for rehabilitation that would justify or not justify a very lengthy sentence for essentially what's a child. And I think we have to remember that that's what we're talking about, and that's the key question here. And so, I mean, this amendment is asking us to have one-time check on someone that was sentenced to a lifetime while they were a child, and give them one check to look at that key question the Supreme Court is asking, whether there's hope for rehabilitation. That's what this amendment does. So I think it's highly problematic. If we're going to engage in the already shady and questionable proposition of subjecting children to life sentences, it seems highly problematic to do that without periodically checking if in fact this child is completely incapable of rehabilitation. And that is why this question, I get it, it's very difficult to ask the victims to come in and revisit this, but I think that's got to be part of the balance when you're opening the door to putting a child in prison for life for something they did when they were a child. And I just think that's an important part of the balance in this conversation, in spite of those tough things that we're asking. So half the states have done this. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Delegate Bartlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate the words that Delegate Moon just said. I think that's very appropriate. I just want to circle back to the very good discussion that Delegate Watson was bringing up, because I got a little confused in that conversation. And that was the point of the amendment. Does the amendment change the opportunity for a juvenile, for someone who was convicted as a juvenile, as an adult? Does it change their opportunity with respect to, in comparison to an adult? Does the amendment do that at all? Because we kept saying the bill, and I know the bill doesn't, but I wonder if the amendment does.
No, and I don't believe his question was, does the amendment limit juveniles in such a way? I'm sorry, we're very briefly. Delegate Lopez, could you mute yourself? That's right. Does the amendment in some way take away the opportunities? I mean, my answer to that would be no. And the reason is, again, I'm going to operate under the presumption that we're passing, that would pass and becomes law, the bill that we dealt with last Friday on getting the governor out of the parole process. So I'm going to build based on that. They would still have the opportunity as a juvenile to go through the parole process. If you were sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, the juvenile would still have that possibility to go through that parole process and have that be accepted or not. All this bill does is it provides effectively another way forward for us to take a closer look at those kids who were sentenced prior to October 1st, 2021. It gives them a further opportunity to be able to say, okay, I want to do a deeper dive and I want to take a closer look at what we did in our case. So to that extent, it actually gives a greater opportunity to the juvenile than it would to an adult.
And that's because of the factors that are listed here. These are not necessarily the factors that a parole board would consider.
They would.
All these complete factors, is that why?
No, they would. There are some things that are not, I mean, one of the things that's not there is an act of contrition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there are some things that are in the parole process that are not here. Having said that, but it broadly touches on a lot of the themes that the parole commission look at as they send people through that process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Delegate Cardin, and then I think we're going to call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick question to understand. This legislation, or what you're describing, this legislation only impacts people who have been sentenced, minors who've been sentenced as adults prior to October 1, 2022. If 2021, excuse me. If a minor gets sentenced as an adult on November 1st, 2021, they're not going to be able to avail themselves of this type of a modification of sentence. They can only avail themselves of the parole process.
Of the standard parole process, correct. So
we're talking about a finite number of people that have been sentenced basically from, let's say, 20 years ago till next October, or this coming October.
It would be people who were sentenced and whose terms of incarceration started before October the 1st, 1991. Effectively, they would be able to, and they were juveniles, convicted as adults.
I would say, while we don't know the exact number, we're talking maybe in the hundreds, probably in the dozens total around the state.
I think the rough estimate is between 400 and 500.
Okay, so
give or take.
And it will not grow. This will accept up until October this year.
Well, and I'll go a step further. I think that what it does is it allows for courts to be able to make that deep dive, to be able to say, okay, what's going on in these individual cases? What's going on with these individual people? And what I think the committee and what I have certainly learned over the last, as we've considered this bill and looked at other states is, these people don't come back. These people are not prone to recidivism at all. It's not, well, look, you can never say never, but having said that, the rate for recidivism is very, very low. But it allows us to do the due diligence that would normally be there for the parole commission and do the due diligence that now a court would be able to do with defense counsel and with the state's attorney to be able to look again and do a deeper dive on that person. So
okay. Thank you for that thoughtful comment.
Yeah. All right, we're on the amendment. Delegate Malone, I'm assuming you want to continue to press the amendment?
I do.
All right, is there a second to press the amendment?
Second.
That's fine. So we will do a roll call on Delegate Malone's amendment. I will say, again, the amendment would eliminate the second and third time they'd be able to request the reconsideration. In the chair's opinion, I think that we should be keeping the second and third time. This would just make it a one time only. So with that, on Delegate Malone's amendment, the vice chair,
No.
Delegate Arakan,
Yes.
Delegate Bartlett,
Yes. No. I'm sorry. That's what I get for walking away for a second.
Delegate Bartlett, would you please state your vote on Delegate Malone's amendment?
No.
Delegate Cardin,
No.
I will just say I paused there because Delegate Bartlett, I thought, spoke against the amendment when she spoke earlier, but in any case, that's why I paused. Delegate Conaway,
No.
Delegate Cox,
Yes.
Delegate Crutchfield,
No.
Delegate Deborah Davis,
No.
Delegate Juanita Fisher,
No.
Delegate Robin Grammer,
Yes.
Delegate Griffith,
Yes.
Delegate Rachel Jones,
No.
Delegate Lopez,
No.
Delegate Malone,
Yes.
Delegate McComas,
Yes.
Delegate Moon,
No.
Delegate Shetty,
No.
Delegate Cham,
Yes.
Delegate Watson,
No.
Delegate Williams.
No.
Amendment fails, 713.
Move the
Move
previous
the previous
question.
question.
We're on the bill as amended, as initially amended. Is there further discussion on the bill as amended? Seeing Delegate Griffith.
Very, very briefly, I don't want to take too much time. Could you just revisit very briefly the amendments that were added on Friday?
What the amendments do is, again, they effectively create the system that I described before, where people who were sentenced prior to October the 1st would be able to go through a process for reconsideration with a judge, that wherein a judge would look at the different factors that are listed in the bill in section D under 8110. They'd be able to go through and look at the factors. The state and the defense would be able to make their arguments and say, we believe that the person should remain incarcerated or that the sentence would be modified. It also makes clear that there was makes clear that the victim would be, that notice of the hearing should be given to the victim and the victim's representative. So they would be able to participate in the hearing. And I think that's the sum and substance of the amendments that were made. All right. Seeing no further discussion, we will do a roll call. The vice chair,
Yes.
Delegate Arakan,
No.
Delegate Bartlett,
Yes.
Delegate Cardin,
Yes.
Delegate Conaway,
Yes.
Delegate Cox,
No.
Delegate Crutchfield,
Yes.
Delegate Deborah Davis,
Yes.
Delegate Juanita Fisher,
Yes.
Delegate Robin Grammer,
No.
Delegate Griffith,
No.
Delegate Rachel Jones,
Yes.
Delegate Lopez,
Yes.
Delegate Malone,
No.
Delegate McComas,
No.
Delegate Moon,
Yes.
Delegate Shetty,
Yes.
Delegate Cham,
No.
Delegate Ron Watson,
Yes.
Delegate Williams.
Yes.
All right, 13-7, the bill is moved favorable with amendments. That concludes our voting session for today. We will almost certainly have voting sessions every day this week. We'll try to announce them as we get them set up and as we're getting greater clarity as to what the floor schedule will be. But until then, we thank you all very much. This concludes the voting session of the House Judiciary